She was forced to marry the ruthless mafia boss, and became his greatest weakness. Whispered tales of shadows moving without bodies filled the alleys. No one dared speak too loudly about the Volkov family, whose power stretched beyond the law, beyond fear, and into the shadows of the supernatural. Isolde stood by the window of her family's ancient mansion, staring at the city below. Her hands were tightly clasped, though she had no one to hold. Tonight her life would change. By dawn, she would belong to the man everyone feared, the ruthless mafia boss, Darian Volkov. Her heart pounded, a storm of fear and something else she could not name. Darian was a legend in Valemire, known for cruelty and cunning. Rumors said he could see through lies, that no one could manipulate him, and that no one had ever escaped his wrath. Yet beneath those tales of terror, there was a story of tragedy, a story of a man who had lost everything and built his empire on darkness. Isolde did not know him personally. She had seen him once at a distant gala where his presence had seemed to bend the light around him. He had eyes like midnight, deep and unreadable, and when he glanced at her she felt as though he could see into the very corners of her soul. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Lady Isolde," a soft voice said, "it is time." She nodded silently, smoothing the folds of her gown. The silk felt heavy on her skin, as if it carried the weight of the future she could not refuse. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "You have no choice. The alliance will protect the family." She had no illusions. Obedience was expected. Resistance could destroy everything. The carriage waited outside, its black wheels turning silently on the wet stones. As she stepped in, a chill ran down her spine. The city outside looked different in the moonlight, strange, alive, almost aware. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, as though the night itself watched her journey. Darian's estate loomed in the distance like a fortress. High walls, black as a raven's wing, guarded the secrets within. It was said that even the bravest soldiers feared the gates, not for the men who stood behind them, but for what lingered beyond, forces beyond human understanding. When the carriage doors opened, Isolde stepped onto the stone steps, her heart a drum of anxious rhythm. The entrance hall stretched endlessly above her, illuminated by chandeliers that glimmered like captured stars. Servants moved silently, their faces expressionless, as though shadows themselves had taken human form. Then she saw him, Darian Volkov. He stood at the top of the staircase, tall and imposing, yet there was a grace to his movements, as if every step was deliberate, measured. His eyes, dark and piercing, met hers immediately. In that instant, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. He was a man of danger, of power, of unspoken sorrow, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she could not understand. "You are Isolde," he said, his voice low and smooth. It was not cruel, yet it carried authority. "I hope you understand what you are entering." I understand," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Darian descended the staircase slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. He studied her as though reading a book, each glance uncovering a layer she had not known existed. There was curiosity in his gaze, a spark that hinted at something hidden beneath the ruthless exterior. "You will live here now," he said, gesturing toward the estate. "This is my world, and you must learn its rules quickly." "Yes, sir," she whispered, though the word felt strange on her lips. The first hours were silent but charged with tension. Isolde wandered the halls, marveling at the grandeur and the darkness interwoven into the walls. Paintings of past Volkov rulers lined the corridors, their eyes seeming to follow her with judgment or perhaps warning. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced across the floors. Every corner seemed alive with whispers, secrets of a world she had never known. Darian appeared intermittently, observing her from the distance. He did not touch her, did not speak unnecessarily, yet every movement seemed to assert dominance and claim. Isolde realized this was a man who wielded power without shouting, who controlled with presence alone. That night she lay in the bed prepared for her, wide-eyed, unable to sleep. The room was luxurious, yet cold, as though the warmth of life had been kept out. She thought of her home, her family, the life she had been forced to leave behind. And yet beneath her fear there was an undeniable curiosity, a desire to understand this man who seemed untouchable, yet somehow incomplete. The silence was broken by a soft knock at the door. "Enter," she said cautiously. Darian stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He did not sit, did not speak immediately. Instead, he studied her, his gaze heavy with consideration. "Do you fear me?" he asked finally. "Yes," she admitted. "And I do not." He raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "I fear what you can do," she said honestly, "but I do not fear you." For a moment his expression softened, almost imperceptibly. He was used to obedience, to fear, to respect, but her words stirred something unusual, something that had lain dormant in him for years. "You are brave," he said quietly, "or perhaps foolish." "Perhaps both," she murmured. The hours passed in conversation and silence, each moment building a strange intimacy. He spoke little of his past, only hinting at pain, loss, and betrayal. She listened, careful, curious. Each word, each glance, each shadowed expression deepened her understanding of the man she was bound to. She realized that beneath the fearsome exterior was a man shaped by darkness, yet capable of something more. As dawn approached, a sudden chill swept through the room. A shadow flickered across the walls, a presence felt but unseen. Isolde's breath caught. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Darian's eyes narrowed. "The estate is alive," he said quietly. "It watches, it remembers." Her heart raced. Fear mingled with excitement. She did not know what the shadow meant, but she sensed that it was a warning. Something beyond the world she had known, beyond even Darian himself, stirred in the darkness. "You must be careful," he said suddenly, moving closer. His presence was overwhelming, yet not threatening. "Valemire is not kind to the weak, and neither am I. I will try," she whispered. He nodded once, and for the first time a flicker of something unreadable passed across his face. Regret, longing, or perhaps something even deeper. He left the room silently, leaving her with a mind full of questions and a heart uncomfortably aware of her own growing feelings. Isolde lay awake long after he left, listening to the quiet of the estate, hearing the whispers of walls and shadows, feeling the weight of the man she was bound to. She was frightened, yes, but she was also drawn to him, to the mystery of Darian Volkov. And somewhere in the distance, a figure moved in the shadows, watching her. It spoke only to her, a voice that was not human yet filled with warning. "He will destroy you unless you change him." Her pulse quickened. The prophecy or warning was unclear. Could she change him? Or was she stepping into a darkness that would consume her? As the first light of dawn crept through the tall windows, Isolde realized one truth she could not escape. Her life would never be the same. She was now bound to a man of power and shadows, and in the storm of fear, mystery, and reluctant fascination, she felt the first stirrings of something forbidden yet undeniable, an emotional connection that would bind her fate to his. The city of Valemire waited outside, silent and watchful. The Volkov estate seemed alive, its walls breathing secrets. And in that breathing darkness, a story of power, fear, and longing was only beginning. Isolde closed her eyes, bracing herself. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew that tomorrow she would wake in a world where shadows could be as dangerous as swords, and where her heart might be the only light capable of piercing them. And in the shadows, Darian Volkov watched, unaware that the woman he had accepted into his world had already begun to become something he had never expected. His greatest weakness. The morning light fell weakly through the tall, narrow windows of the Volkov estate. The halls, grand yet cold, seemed to hum with a quiet power. Isolde walked slowly, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished stone floors. Each room she passed seemed alive, carrying the weight of history, secrets, and whispers that no one dared speak aloud. Darien had left early, as was his custom, moving like a shadow through the city to manage his empire. But he had left instructions. Isolde was to explore, to understand the estate, and to find her place within it. She wondered what that place would be, not just in the walls of this fortress, but in the life of the man she was bound to. The first hours were lonely. The staff moved silently, almost too silently, as if the house itself dictated their movements. Servants bowed as she passed, eyes lowered, careful not to draw attention. Isolde realized that in this house, power was visible in small gestures, a nod, a glance, a silence. She wandered into the library, a vast room lined with towering shelves. Ancient tomes whispered secrets of law, history, and alchemy. Dust motes floated in the air, disturbed only by her presence. One book, bound in deep red leather, seemed to call to her. She opened it carefully and found handwritten notes in the margins, Darien's own handwriting. They spoke of strategy, of leadership, and of a man who feared nothing except losing control. A sudden sound made her jump. It was soft, almost like a whisper. She turned and saw Darien standing at the doorway. "You should not be afraid," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The estate watches you, yes, but it will not harm you, not unless I allow it." Isolde swallowed. "It feels alive, watching me." "That is because it is," he said. "This estate has held the Volkovs for centuries. It remembers every betrayal, every secret. Every time someone enters these walls, the house knows them." She studied him. Even in casual conversation, his presence seemed to fill the room. Every movement he made was deliberate, controlled, as though he was always aware of every shadow, every possibility. And yet, there was something human in his eyes today, a faint flicker of curiosity. "Why did you leave those notes in the book?" she asked. Darien's gaze softened just slightly. "Perhaps I hoped someone would understand. Someone would see beyond the power, the fear, and understand the man beneath." The words struck her. She realized that this man, whom the world feared, had vulnerabilities, layers he never showed. And though he did not speak of them openly, she felt their weight. Their days settled into a strange rhythm. Darien allowed her to explore the estate, but always under his watchful eye. Sometimes he appeared without warning, observing her from the shadows, testing her reactions. At first, she felt fear. But soon, curiosity and a strange sense of connection replaced it. She began to anticipate his presence, the way one might notice the shift in the wind before a storm. One afternoon, she found herself in the gardens, a place of rare light and color in the otherwise shadowed estate. The flowers seemed out of place, delicate and fragile, yet resilient. She ran her fingers along the petals, thinking of the world she had left behind, and then heard the soft footsteps behind her. "You like the gardens," Darien said, his voice near her ear, though she had not noticed him approach. Yes," she replied, trying not to show how startled she was. "They are alive in a way the house is not. They are gentle." He stood beside her, silent for a moment. The distance between them felt charged, full of questions neither dared speak aloud. "Gentle is dangerous," he said finally. "It can make you vulnerable. And yet," she whispered, "sometimes gentle is what we need to survive." He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. She realized then that he was testing her, not with threats or commands, but with understanding. He wanted to know her courage, her intelligence, her willingness to face the unknown. And she, in turn, wanted to understand him, to see the man behind the ruthless mask. Days turned into weeks. Isolde learned the rules of the estate, of the power Darien held, not just in the city but in every corner of his world. She discovered hidden corridors, rooms filled with strange artifacts, and a network of secrets only he knew. And through it all, their relationship evolved, not a simple bond but a complex, intricate dance. Sometimes they sparred with words, challenging each other's assumptions. Other times they shared quiet moments, Darien showing her a rare painting, Isolde reading passages from ancient texts aloud. Each interaction was charged with tension, a careful balance of respect, curiosity, and something more unspoken. One evening, a letter arrived, sealed with a mark she did not recognize. Darian read it silently, his expression unreadable. When he looked at her, she saw a flash of something hidden: anger, worry, fear. "They have learned of you," he said quietly. "There are those in the city who would use your presence to challenge me." Her pulse quickened. "Use me? How?" "They will test your loyalty, your courage, and if you fail, they will try to hurt what I care for." For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor. The man who seemed untouchable and invincible, feared by all, was unsettled. And she realized her presence had begun to matter to him more than she had ever expected. In the nights that followed, Darian taught her to navigate the subtle power of the city, how to read people, anticipate danger, and command respect without raising a hand. Isolde learned quickly, driven by survival and curiosity. And in return, Darian began to reveal pieces of himself he had never shown another. A fleeting smile, a rare story of his past, a moment of shared laughter, small, quiet acts that warmed the cold halls of the estate. Yet the tension remained. Each gesture, each glance was layered with questions and unspoken fears. Isolde found herself thinking of him when he was gone, imagining his presence in every shadow, every whisper of wind. And Darian, he noticed, more than he wanted to admit. Her courage, her intelligence, her unbroken spirit, they stirred something long buried within him, something that had lain dormant in the darkness of his past. One night, a sudden commotion broke the quiet. A rival family had sent men to test the Volkov estate to see if the rumors of Darian's power were true. The alarms rang through the halls, and the estate came alive with movement. Guards armed themselves, shadows lengthened, and the air became thick with anticipation and danger. Darian moved like a storm, commanding with authority, but then he froze, his eyes searching for her. She had followed instinct, hiding but observing, and he realized with a sharp clarity that he could not face this threat alone. Her presence, her courage, had become essential. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice low but urgent. "Do not leave my side." They moved through the halls together, shadows among shadows, side by side. Isolde saw him in a new light, focused, decisive, yet faltering only when she was in danger. She understood then that she had become something more than a pawn in the city's power games. She had become a part of him, a presence that could break his control or save it. After the threat was contained, Darian found her in the library, breathless, hands trembling slightly. He studied her closely, not with anger but with something far more complicated. "You are not afraid," he said softly. "I am," she admitted, "but I do not run." For a moment he was silent and the room seemed to shrink around them. Then he said quietly, "Perhaps you are the first person who has ever stood beside me and not feared me. Perhaps—" his voice trailed off. Isolde looked at him, her heart pounding. "Perhaps what?" "Perhaps you are my greatest weakness," he said finally, his eyes locking onto hers with a depth that made her feel both fragile and powerful. Her chest tightened. The words were not boastful, nor cruel. They were a confession, a truth that neither of them could ignore. She realized then that she felt the same. He was dangerous, yes, but also the only person she had ever truly wanted to understand, to reach, to touch, even if only with her heart. The nights that followed were quiet but electric. They shared small moments that carried weight: a look across the table, a hand brushing against hers, a conversation about the past and the impossible future. Each moment deepened the unspoken connection between them, a bond forged in shadows, trust, and the slow discovery of something neither had expected: a longing for each other's presence, a desire not of the body but of the soul. And yet danger lingered at the edges of their world. The letter, the rival families, and the whispers of the supernatural reminded them that their lives were never fully their own. Every choice, every gesture, every moment together was shadowed by risk. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood red and gold, a whisper carried to Isolde in her chamber. It was faint, almost inaudible, yet she understood it immediately. "Beware the shadows you trust, for even hearts can deceive." Her pulse quickened. She did not know the voice, but she felt its warning deep in her bones. The estate, the city, and the man she had begun to care for were all intertwined with danger far greater than she had imagined. And Darien, he stood in the doorway watching her, unaware that the shadow had spoken. His eyes held both concern and something else, a realization that the woman beside him was more than a companion. She was his equal in courage, in will, and perhaps in fate. As the night deepened, they each felt the quiet stirrings of a future that was uncertain, dangerous, yet irresistible. Their dance of power and desire had only just begun, and neither could turn away from the pull that bound them together. The city of Valemere slept uneasily beneath the rising moon, but the Volkov estate, alive, watchful, and eternal, held two hearts on the edge of destiny. One man, once untouchable, and one woman, whose courage and spirit had begun to shape him. Together, they would face shadows yet unseen, and each step would draw them closer to a truth neither dared speak aloud. That in a world of power, fear, and darkness, they might find in each other the light they had long denied. And in the silent halls, in the flickering candlelight, a new chapter of their story began, one where trust, longing, and courage would be tested against the shadows that sought to claim them both. The night in Valemere was thick with mist, curling around the spires of the city, like living fingers. The Volkov estate, perched atop its hill, seemed to breathe with an almost conscious life. Inside, Isolde paced in her chamber, her thoughts tangled with worry and curiosity. Ever since the confrontation with the rival family, a tension had settled in the estate, heavy and unyielding, as though the shadows themselves had grown restless. Darien appeared at the doorway, silent as a shadow. His dark eyes, sharp and commanding, softened for a moment when they met hers. "You're awake," he said, stepping inside. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "There's something in the air tonight, I can feel it." He nodded, his expression serious. "The city feels it too. Old powers stir. Forces I thought long buried are waking." Isolde shivered. She had heard whispers of the supernatural in Valemere, tales of curses, ancient rivalries, and dark entities that preyed upon weakness. Until now, they had been stories, distant and unreal. But standing here, listening to Darien speak, she realized the danger was very real. "They are connected to your family," she said quietly, almost afraid of the words. Darien's gaze fell to the floor. "Yes, a curse runs through my bloodline, centuries old. It feeds on fear, betrayal, and the shadows of the heart. I thought I had contained it, but perhaps I was wrong." Isolde stepped closer, her hand trembling slightly. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. "I will not let you face it alone." He looked at her, and for the first time his mask of control cracked. "You could be harmed," he warned. "You could lose more than you realize. Are you sure you understand?" "I understand more than you think," she said, "and I trust you." The words hung in the air, charged with meaning. Darien felt a surge of something he had never allowed himself to feel, a vulnerability, a recognition that she had become essential to him. She was no longer just a guest in his world. She had become a part of him, a presence that could awaken both his strength and his weakness. The next day, they descended into the catacombs beneath the estate, a place few had seen. The walls were carved with ancient symbols, the air thick with dust and the weight of centuries. Torches flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the stone floors. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, as if the house itself was warning them. "This is where the curse began," Darien explained, his voice echoing in the hollow chambers. "Generations of my family, they tried to control it, contain it, ignore it. None succeeded. It grows stronger when fear takes hold, when hearts turn cold." Isolde's eyes widened. "And you think it will affect me too?" "It already does," he said quietly. "Your presence has awakened something I could not face alone." As they moved deeper, strange whispers brushed against their ears, half-heard and almost imagined. Shadows shifted unnaturally along the walls. Isolde clutched Darian's arm, feeling the warmth of him grounding her against the chilling presence. "You must be careful," he murmured. "The curse does not attack the body first. It attacks trust, loyalty, and the heart. It can make you doubt everything you believe in, including me." "I trust you," she said firmly, meeting his gaze, "and I will not let it control us." A sudden movement caught their attention. A figure, dark and indistinct, glided along the far corridor. It vanished before they could approach, leaving only the echo of its presence. The air grew colder, more oppressive. "We are not alone," Darian said, his hand brushing against the dagger at his belt. "The curse protects itself. It has servants, remnants of the past, shadows that feed on fear." Isolde took a deep breath, feeling her pulse quicken. Fear was present, yes, but it was mingled with determination. "Then we fight it," she said, "together." The nights that followed were tense. Strange occurrences plagued the estate, doors opening on their own, whispers in empty halls and fleeting shadows that seemed to watch them. Darian moved with precision, controlling the estate, guiding Isolde, but always with caution. She learned to anticipate the dangers, to move silently, and to observe the subtle signs of the supernatural. One evening, as a storm raged over the city, they discovered a hidden chamber. The walls were inscribed with symbols that glowed faintly in the candlelight, revealing the history of the Volkov curse. Darian traced the carvings with his fingers, his face drawn tight with emotion. "It began with greed and betrayal," he said, "a pact made in desperation. My ancestors sought power beyond human reach, and in return they invited the darkness." Isolde studied the symbols, tracing the lines with care. "Can it be broken?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Darian hesitated. "I do not know. But it can be contained, weakened, perhaps even ended, if one has the courage to face it." Their eyes met, and in that gaze unspoken understanding passed between them. They would face it together, no matter the cost. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the chamber in brief, violent flashes. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Isolde felt a chill, but Darian's presence steadied her. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly. "Stronger than anyone I have ever known. And you," she said softly, "are not as untouchable as you believe." The words lingered between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had grown. Fear and longing mingled, creating a tension neither could deny. The curse was real, dangerous, and relentless, but so was their connection, forged in trust, courage, and moments of vulnerability. A sudden crash echoed through the estate. A hidden passage had opened, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly red, a remnant of the curse's power. It moved with unnatural speed, heading straight for them. Darian stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between Isolde and the shadow. "Stay behind me," he commanded. His dagger glinted in the torchlight, but the shadow did not flinch. It was not afraid. Isolde's heart raced. She knew she could not remain passive. Drawing on every lesson Darian had taught her, she held a small talisman he had given her, an object imbued with protective energy. She focused, willing it to react, willing the light to push back the darkness. The shadow hesitated, recoiling slightly from the glow. Darian seized the moment, striking with precision. The figure dissipated into smoke and whispers, leaving only a lingering sense of unease. They both stood in silence, breathing heavily, the tension thick between them. Darian looked at her, and she saw a vulnerability in his eyes that he never allowed anyone to witness. "You were brave," he said quietly, "braver than I expected." "I had you to guide me," she replied, her voice soft, "and I trust you." The storm outside began to subside, leaving the estate in an uneasy calm. But both of them knew the danger was far from over. The curse was relentless, ancient, and cunning. It would not be defeated easily. In the days that followed, they continued to prepare. Darien taught her the strategies to anticipate threats, both human and supernatural. They explored the estate further, uncovering hidden rooms, secret libraries, and remnants of the past that held clues to breaking the curse. Through it all, their bond deepened. Small gestures carried immense weight. A hand held briefly, a look that lingered too long, a shared moment of quiet understanding. Each encounter tested their trust, their courage, and their growing affection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the estate in a golden glow, Darien led Isolde to the highest tower. From there, they could see the city sprawled beneath them, bathed in fading light. "The curse touches everything," he said softly, "but it does not control you. You have a choice to be afraid or to stand with me and face it." Isolde looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of fear, admiration, and something deeper. "Then I choose to stand," she said. "With you." Darien's expression softened, and for the first time he allowed himself a smile, not the sharp, controlled smile he used to command, but a genuine, unguarded one. "Then together," he said, "we may yet survive the shadows." As night fell, they descended from the tower, unaware that the shadows of the past had not retreated entirely. Somewhere in the depths of Valemire, a presence watched, patient and cunning. It whispered promises of trials yet to come, testing not just their courage, but the strength of the bond that had begun to define them both. In the quiet of the night, Darien and Isolde stood side by side, ready to face the ancient curse. They did not know what awaited them, shadows, betrayals, or truths long hidden, but they knew one thing with certainty. Together, they were stronger than the darkness that sought to consume them. And as the wind swept through the towers and the estate breathed with a life of its own, they realized that the most dangerous force of all was not the curse itself, but the emotions it had awakened between them. Love, trust, and courage were fragile, and yet, in the hands of two hearts willing to fight, they could become their greatest strength. The shadows in Valemire had stirred, and the battle was far from over. But Darien and Isolde had taken the first steps together, facing fear, darkness, and the unknown. And in that first step, they found a spark, a bond that might, just might, survive the curse of the heart. The city of Valemire lay under a pale silver moon, its spires slicing the sky like jagged teeth. The mist clung to the cobblestones, curling around the streets and alleys like living fingers. Somewhere in the heart of the city, shadows whispered secrets of the past, ancient pacts, curses, and promises of vengeance. In the Volkov estate, the air was thick with tension. Darien and Isolde had sensed it coming for days, the presence that had been stirring beneath the city, a force older than any living thing, tied to the curse that haunted Darien's bloodline. This night, they knew, the shadows would make themselves known. They stood together in the grand hall, surrounded by the remnants of centuries-old strategy. Maps, books, and talismans scattered across the marble floor. Torches flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed almost alive. "This is it," Darien said quietly, his hand brushing against the dagger at his belt. "The source of the curse is waking. We cannot wait any longer." Isolde nodded, her own hand resting lightly on a small talisman she had been given. "Then we face it together," she said. "No matter what comes." For a moment they simply looked at each other. Words were not necessary. Months of shared danger, trust, and quiet understanding had forged a connection stronger than fear. And in that bond they found courage neither had known before. The first movement came from the shadows at the edge of the hall. Dark shapes formed, flickering and twisting like smoke given life. The air grew heavy, the torches flickered violently, and a chill swept through the room. Darien moved first, stepping protectively in front of Isolde, his dagger flashing as the shadows surged toward them. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice steady but edged with urgency. Isolde tightened her grip on the talisman and focused. She felt the energy of the estate, the history embedded in its walls, and drew strength from it. Light flared briefly from the talisman, pushing back the darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. The shadows recoiled, but the danger was far from over. From the deepest corner of the hall, a figure emerged, a being wreathed in smoke, with eyes like burning coals. It moved with unnatural grace, and its voice echoed, low and menacing. "You dare challenge what your family invited," it hissed, the sound curling around their hearts like ice. "You cannot defeat me, you cannot escape the curse." Darian stepped forward, his dagger held high. "We do not fear you," he said, "not while we face this together." The figure's laughter was like the scraping of metal on stone. Together, two fragile hearts against centuries of darkness. Foolish. Isolde felt a surge of resolve. She glanced at Darian, seeing the fierce determination in his eyes. She realized that the strength they needed did not come from weapons or talismans. It came from their trust in each other. "Foolish, perhaps," she said boldly, "but together we are stronger than fear, stronger than your shadows." The figure paused, its form flickering, unsettled by her courage. Darian moved closer to her, their hands brushing briefly, a silent affirmation of the bond that had grown between them. The shadows seemed to hesitate, as though recognizing the force of connection that even they could not pierce. With a sharp motion, Darian lunged, striking the heart of the shadow. The figure shrieked, dissipating into tendrils of smoke that retreated to the corners of the hall. Isolde followed quickly, the talisman glowing brighter in her hands, reinforcing the protective light against the darkness. The battle was not easy. The shadows returned again and again, twisting and reforming with terrifying persistence. But each time their attacks faltered in the face of courage, trust, and unity. Darian's skill and Isolde's bravery became a rhythm, a dance of strategy, instinct, and emotional strength. Hours passed, though time seemed to bend in the midst of the battle. Finally, in a moment of pure clarity, Darian and Isolde understood what they must do. The figure, the curse, was tied to the oldest part of the estate, the cathedral ruins beneath the mansion, a place long abandoned, where the first pact had been made. "We end this now," Darian said, his voice low but commanding. "The past does not control us anymore." Isolde nodded, determination steady in her gaze. Together, they descended into the catacombs, through twisting corridors filled with the echoes of history. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves remembered betrayal and pain. At the heart of the ruins, the source of the curse waited, a dark mass, shifting, alive, and ancient. "You cannot defeat me," it whispered, the voice like wind through dead trees. "Your hearts are weak, your courage is fragile." Darian stepped forward, placing himself between Isolde and the darkness. "Our hearts are not weak," he said firmly. "They are stronger because we trust each other." Isolde joined him, talisman raised, eyes blazing with resolve. "We will not let you define us. We will not be afraid." The darkness shrieked and surged, lashing out like tendrils, but the combined force of their courage and connection pushed it back. Light flared from the talisman, mingling with the strength of Darian's presence, creating a shield that even the ancient curse could not break. And then, in a sudden moment, the shadow lunged directly at them. Darian moved instinctively, placing himself in front of Isolde, but this time he faltered. A wave of emotion, long suppressed, surged through him: fear, love, and the desperate desire to protect her. For the first time he realized how much she meant to him, not as a pawn, not as a companion, but as the anchor of his soul. "Isolde," he whispered urgently, "now." With a synchronized motion, she directed the talisman's energy while he struck with precision. A brilliant light exploded in the ruins, pushing the shadow back violently. It shrieked, twisting in agony before finally dissipating into nothingness. The ruins fell silent, the oppressive weight lifted. The curse, ancient and relentless, had been broken, not by power alone, but by trust, courage, and love. Darien turned to Isolde, breathing heavily, his eyes searching hers. You were incredible," he said softly, awe in his voice. "You were too," she replied, her voice steady despite exhaustion. "We did it together." For the first time, the estate felt calm. The shadows that had whispered and watched were gone, leaving only the quiet hum of life. The catacombs seemed warmer somehow, lighter, as if the weight of centuries had lifted. They emerged into the estate's halls, still holding hands, their connection undeniable. Neither spoke at first. Words were unnecessary. The bond forged in darkness and danger, in trust and courage, was stronger than anything either had experienced before. Days passed, and the estate slowly returned to normal. Darien moved through the halls with his usual authority, but now there was a softness in his gaze reserved only for Isolde. And she, in turn, felt a sense of belonging she had never known, no longer just a guest or a forced companion, but a partner in life, in challenge, in courage. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Darien and Isolde stood in the highest tower, looking out over Valemire. The city below seemed peaceful, unaware of the battle that had raged in the shadows. "We survived," Isolde said quietly, leaning slightly against him. "Yes," Darien replied, his arm brushing hers. "But more importantly, we changed. We survived not because we were strong alone, but because we faced the darkness together." She smiled softly. "I never thought I could trust someone so completely, but I trust you, Darien, and I think you trust me too." He turned to her, eyes intense yet gentle. "More than I thought I ever could. You are my greatest weakness and my greatest strength." A quiet laughter passed between them, a sound of relief and joy. The city, the estate, the shadows, all seemed smaller in comparison to the bond they had forged. That night, as the moon rose high, casting silver light across the estate, they walked together through the halls, not as master and guest, not as protector and protected, but as equals. Each step was a promise, to face what came, to trust each other, and to embrace the love and courage that had been born in the shadows. The curse of the heart had tested them, tried them, and threatened to destroy them. But in the end, it had revealed something greater: the power of connection, the strength of trust, and the courage of two hearts willing to fight together. And as dawn broke over Valemire, painting the city in light and hope, Darien and Isolde stood together, ready for whatever new challenges the world might bring. The shadows had receded, but their bond, forged in darkness and trial, would endure. They were no longer defined by fear, power, or curses. They were defined by each other. And somewhere in the silent corners of the estate, a whisper seemed to linger, not of threat, but of promise, that even in the darkest shadows, love and courage could shine brighter than any fear, and that two hearts united could change the fate of the world.